Let's talk about the race and where are we. You know, their book, if you've not read it or seen the Emmy Award-winning film, was such an event because of how compelling the story was that they told and that they covered and what they reported. But also the name in and of itself is now such a big part of our political vocabulary, is something a game changer in the race. So Mark, let me start with that. Are we in the middle of a game change of this 2012 race? And if we are, describe it.
Well, we undoubtedly are because of the debate in Denver. Really, in my career, I can't think of an analog for a situation where public expectations of that event were high. The expectation was the president would win the debate. Overwhelmingly, people thought that regardless of party. And the result of the debate was people overwhelmingly thought, both the public and people in elite circles overwhelmingly thought the president had lost the debate. The polls, we're just starting to see polls, but there's no doubt that one side now has momentum, Governor Romney. And Governor Romney, the biggest change I saw, the biggest game change I saw in that debate, at least so far, is that going into the debate, the president's team assured us, we know what our message is, we're running on one thing, Mitt Romney is too far to the right. That's going to be our message all the way through. We can't go back to the old policies of the Bush years. And Governor Romney seemed to change his message every day. In the debate, and since the debate, Governor Romney has one message, which is, why would you expect the next 4 years to be any different than the last 4 years? And the president's team is scrambling around, changing their message. They're running, saying Governor Romney's a liar, or Governor Romney is unalterably opposed to Big Bird, or whatever. So now that switch is a bad thing, obviously, for the president, because in politics, you're better off running on a single message. And we're still seeing that play out.
So John, if Mitt Romney wanted out of the debate a second look, and he's got it, what does he want to show?
Well, first of all, I want to just say that, you know, I'm sitting around Manuel's chair. You know, he always says, you know, if you could only just sit in my chair and see the decisions I have to make.
Yes.
And now I'm in Rom's chair, so I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about that.
And yet you've used no profanity as of yet.
Yes. It's early. It's early. It's early. I think that, look, Governor Romney has, in a lot of ways, that they have had a theory about this race. They've had competing theories about the race. The Romney theory about this race is that it was going to be a referendum on President Obama's economic stewardship and management. And he has always wanted, and his team has always wanted for this race to be an up or down vote on Barack Obama. The president's team has wanted to make it into a choice between two people and their visions and values for the future. An incumbent races are usually, you know, referendum elections. And Governor Romney struggled for a long time to do that, because if you're going to do that, you not only have to prosecute a case against the president, but you have to be a viable alternative. You have to be able to, you have a safe pair of hands, right? I think, to answer your question directly, that's what he wants to show. And you think about, he went into the debate with extraordinarily high negatives. He was the most unpopular, according to the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. He had the worst favorable, unfavorable rating in the history of the poll, apart from George Herbert Walker Bush in October of 1992. So he needed not only to prosecute his case against the president, but also to make himself more palatable to a lot of Americans, make himself more likable, make himself seem more sympathetic. I think, you know, that some of the comments about how he recast himself are somewhat overstated, but he did present himself more as the pragmatic, moderate Massachusetts governor that I think a lot of us thought he would run as for a long time, and I think that's going to be the message going forward. In addition to the thing that Mark said in terms of how he criticized the president, he wants people to see him as not an extremist and not just an inheritor of Bush-style Republican.
But can you do that, Mark, in a final month? When you have such high personal negatives, can you say, look, there was an inner pragmatist and moderate here that was just waiting to burst out, and now here he is.
Like Alien, like the animal,
Right,
like Alien
right.
jumping out of the guy's chest, just like that.
Well, the answer to that, I think, is complicated by the fact that we don't really know how closely the undecided voters have paid attention. We were talking backstage about this question of, are people who are reacting positively to that debate, are they reacting because this is the first time they've really thought about Mitt Romney, or did the debate cause them to think anew about Mitt Romney because they had formed an impression that was somewhat solid? And to the extent they've changed their view, is that going to change again if he has a poor debate, or if he does something else out on the campaign trail that reverts to the form that we saw for 5 years? I think that Governor Romney has, that wasn't meant to be funny, just factual.
Yeah.
I think Governor Romney, how many people in the room, let me do a quick survey, how many people in the room have spent quality time with Governor Romney? Raise your hand. One, right? Okay, you're a distinguished group of influential people, and yet none of you have spent time with him. That's been a real problem for him, because almost anyone who's spent time with him will tell you that he is a much different person off the television camera than he's portrayed up until the debate in Denver. And if he could meet every one of you in the next 30 days, he would, but he doesn't have time, let alone to meet all the people he needs to meet. If he performs in the next two debates and in his other high-profile appearances and in the battleground states where most of us don't see him day to day, if he performs the way he did in the debate, I think he can change impressions to a large extent.
Let's talk about a couple of decisive aspects. First of all, polling. We were talking about this backstage. There was so much great stuff going on backstage. How about we just all go backstage now, and we'll just keep talking. That's where a lot of the good stuff is. Michigan polling is a piece of news today that caught your eye.
Well, we've all been waiting for the battleground state polls that are legitimate to come out since the debate to see if things change. There haven't been very many. There's a poll in Michigan that's pretty respected and a solid poll that came out this afternoon that showed Governor Romney down only 3, 48-45 in Michigan. Now, that's within the margin of error. It's a state that 4 months ago Governor Romney definitely wanted to compete in, where his father was governor, where he grew up. It doesn't mean he's going to win Michigan, but if Michigan is truly anything like a 3-point race after being pretty much double digits and out of reach for Governor Romney, that would suggest, if there's a national movement, and there's no reason to think Michigan would be an outlier, that states like Iowa, New Hampshire, Ohio, Virginia, where Governor Romney really does need to close the gap to have a chance, are probably closer.
Well, so John, pick up on that. David Plouffe, when I interviewed him a week ago, said, look, if they're saying that, the day after the debate, the narrative is going to change, then you're going to start to see our 7-point lead in Ohio slip. It's going to become even, and then you'll know. So we are going to start watching polling both nationally, and we've seen some of that, and also watch Ohio.
Yes, well, and there's a very large poll out today, a national poll, the Pew poll, which a month ago, the big sample poll, a month ago had President Obama ahead nationally by 5. Today has Governor Romney ahead by 4. That's a 9-point swing over the course of a month. And look, David Plouffe set expectations, as one does, artificially high. But the problem with doing that is that if the other side then meets those expectations, boy, you really have a problem. And I think one of the problems for the president right now is that, he has really, we don't get to another presidential debate, for another full week from now. So he's had a bad stretch since, as Mark said, these alternating messages and seeming a little desperate the last few days. We have a vice presidential debate between now and then, of course. We get to see Paul Ryan and Joe Biden, and God knows I'm buying my popcorn now for that thing. But you've got another full week, and the truth is the amount of pressure that Governor Romney was under in Denver was extraordinarily high. I mean, I think the biggest thing that happened more than anything else is that had he not performed at a level that we've not seen him, as Mark said, for 5 years, the Republican Party was ready to write him off. Donors, elected officials were ready to say, "You're Bob Dole. We're done. We're going to go off and take care of ourselves." He bought himself new life. The president now is in that same position. 67 million people watched the debate the other day. More people than watched any of the debates in 2008. More than people than watched the convention speeches. More than have ever watched any of Barack Obama's States of the Union addresses, right? The audience at the next presidential debate at Hofstra is going to be bigger, because Obama's collapse in Denver is now like urban legend. People people are talking about it as if there's going to be an alligator came up out of the sewer and grabbed him and pulled him down underneath or something. People are going to tune in because they want to see, can Barack Obama recover? And that raises, in addition to seeing all these changes at the state level in terms of polling, it just makes this debate 70, 75 million people watching. Man, the president is going to be under as much or more pressure than Governor Romney was last time, and that's going to make it a very, very, very huge high-stakes event.
So, Mark, who are they talking to at this point? How many undecided voters are left? Are they more important than the quote-unquote softly committed, Obama supporters who Romney's trying to bring around?
Well, because there's an endless amount of time to fill on cable news, you have people saying all sorts of things that aren't true. say this is a base election or this is an election about the swing
That
voters.
never happens on cable news. What are you talking about?
All elections are both, and so don't just, I think we shouldn't just think about the undecided voters and the soft undecideds. We should think about who's going to turn out. Under the horse race number at the top of people look at, one of the changes we've seen in some of the polling is that Republican intensity is back up. Republicans are more anxious to vote, more energized to vote. And so these polls, if they're close, if they're within even 3 points, on the one side you have turnout, you have getting people to the polls through different mechanisms, both new and old, but you also just have the question of who's really determined to vote. The president, both these campaigns look at 2004 as a model of what's going on. The last time we had an incumbent running for re-election. And one of the things that John Kerry's campaign thought was, we don't really need people to love John Kerry because they hate George Bush so much, they're going to turn out to vote against him. A lot of Democrats looked at what happened and said, you know what, that's not enough. You got to have your guy be beloved also. One of the many spin-off effects of the Romney debate performances, it's possible now that Republicans are feeling good enough about him that they'll be energized to vote both to turn out for their candidate and against the president. It's hard to know exactly, 7%, 9%, 12% is undecided. My suspicion has always been, just based on doing this for a while and looking at the data, is that it's a bigger universe, that people will tell pollsters they're for somebody, but that they may be soft, as you said. And so we may see a swing. If someone ends this strong, if Governor Romney ends strong or the president ends strong, we may see, based on base excitement and the softness of a larger group that goes with the flow of who looks like it's going to be the winner, who looks stronger, we may see this not being quite the nail-biter as some suspect. We may not, but I think that's a real possibility.
What's decisive, John, here in our final month? We talk about debates being so important, and you mentioned it, because the audience is so big. And you also have people tuning in to say, okay, what am I going to do here? Let me hear what they actually have to say. So that's a big opportunity. What else do you think is really decisive?
Well, I think on the president's side, one of the things, the few bright spots in the debate, and they point to the broader things you're talking about. The president, if you went over to One Prudential and talked to them, the advantage they have always had, and it's the advantage of incumbency. While the other side is spending months raising money, spending money, beating each other senseless. You got to do some, mud wrestling with Newt Gingrich, and you got to deal with Rick Santorum, and you got all this. Mitt Romney's dealing with all these problems. They sit there in Chicago and they look at 9 states, and they look at 4 voter groups, and they say, young voters, African-American voters, Hispanic voters, white, college-educated women in these 9 states. We're going to move into those states, and we know exactly the number of votes that we need. We know what the turnout has to be in those groups. We can identify those voters door to door, and we're spending, while you guys are out there beating each other up, we have time and we have money. And a technologically sophisticated, smart campaign with time and money can get a lot of work done out there, and they've been doing that work for a long time. The question of intensity that Mark brought up is really important, though, because in some of those voter groups, like Hispanics in particular, there seems to not be the kind of intensity, and there's not the kind of enthusiasm. And although the president leads by wide margins with those groups, the question is, again, how many of them are going to turn out? And I think, Mark may be right. It's possible that we will not have a nail-biter. My guess is that we are going to have a nail-biter, and that question, that ground game in a lot of these states could end up really being decisive. And the president does have a real advantage there. And one thing you can say about the debate, Mitt Romney did himself a world of good at the debate, did not solve his problems with some of those groups, didn't do anything to make the 70-30 split on Hispanics go away, didn't do anything to help himself with women voters who were worried about reproductive rights, about contraceptives, about stuff like that. None of those issues came up in the debate. I don't know that those numbers are going to move very much. So there's still things that the president has, building blocks that are very solid. He just needs now to go back to the structural stuff that he has that's in his favor. He needs to go back and be able to reclaim that ground.
So Mark, just on the electoral map alone, I think people are always interested in handicapping that. We talk a lot about how, even as the race tightens up, structurally it's difficult for Romney to win. And John mentioned it among certain voting groups, Latinos, women, young voters, minorities more broadly. Go in some of the battleground states, what he has to do and why it's difficult.
Well, I mean, those demographics undergird the Electoral College because obviously in every one of those states, those are important groups, and some more than others, like the Hispanic votes in a lot of the battleground states, but not all of them. The president starts right now with about 230 electoral votes. Governor Romney starts with about 200. give or take, and that is a huge margin when you consider you need 270 to win. Governor Romney basically has to win some combination of, depending on which states they are, 7 or 6 or 8 of these remaining states. They're all states the president won last time. 3 southern states, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, New Hampshire in the Northeast, Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin in the Midwest, and then Nevada and Colorado out west. That's it. No one is thinking that anything else is coming back on the map, that Michigan poll notwithstanding. And it's a real tall order to win that many states. I've thought for a while, people sort of play with the math and try to get Romney, see if Romney can get to 270. I've thought for a while he cannot cherry pick his way to 270. He can't find a way to sort of steal this one here and this one here. I think he's going to need a national tide where all or almost all of those states come his way. But it's very difficult. It's far and away the president's biggest disadvantage. And of course, it's all about the Electoral College. Both sides have enough money. Both sides, both candidates and their surrogates, vice presidential candidates, going to those states again and again. But I think it's going to require more of a national tide for Governor Romney to have a chance.
So we've got just a few minutes left, and I want to be forward-looking a little bit. One of the biggest issue in Washington is the fiscal cliff. Spending cuts are going to kick in. The Bush tax cuts are set to expire. Everything that was attempted in terms of a grand bargain on balancing the budget needs to work somehow, needs to be agreed to. So the first 100 to 200 days of either a second term or a new Romney term, what's going to happen? What do you think?
Armageddon,
Yeah, right. I mean, after that.
The whole world's going to melt down. Look, it's a very big question, and one of the things that was most heartening about the debate, just as a citizen, was that it was a really substantive debate, and we'd had a campaign that's been kind of like a Seinfeld campaign, right? Really a campaign about nothing, and suddenly you had these two wonky guys talking in a lot of detail about policy, and that was kind of like, felt good for a minute, and maybe we'll be lucky and we'll see a lot of that for the rest of the month. I wouldn't count on it, but maybe we'll be lucky. The problem for both of them is that because neither has laid out a very specific set of agenda items about how they're going to deal with the next 4 years broadly, and more specifically with those issues that you just talked about in terms of the fiscal cliff, neither one of them, it seems to me, unless things really radically change in the next month, is going to have a mandate to govern. So they both, in some respects, have made their lives more difficult. Governor Romney at the debate said, "I'm not interested in new revenue." Well, you need new revenue if you're going to solve the nation's long-term fiscal crisis. President Obama, who put significant Medicare entitlement reform on the table with John Boehner last summer when they were negotiating over the grand bargain then, is now out ruthlessly demagoguing the Medicare issue against Mitt Romney. I have some hope, which is born of cynicism. I think both of them will be perfectly willing to throw overboard a lot of the promises they made in this campaign in order to try to get that kind of a big deal done. And I think that the reason for it is cynical. I think President Obama is very focused, if he gets reelected, on his legacy. And that if he gets reelected, health care will have been a big trophy for him. If he loses, it won't be. It'll be one of the reasons he lost. But if he wins, it'll be a big trophy, a huge Democratic liberal priority. If he could then do a big grand bargain and get the nation's fiscal house in order going forward, he'd be done. He could go back to Washington Sports Center. He doesn't need to do anything else. He's got two huge career-making accomplishments. Governor Romney, his presidency, if he gets elected, will hang on this issue because these are huge issues, and if they're not solved, and I don't really believe that there's a way to deal with the sequester and the Bush tax cuts without doing it as a grand bargain. I don't think you can do this in a piecemeal way.
Simpson Bowles say it's got to be a $4 trillion effort to cut the budget.
So if that's true, Governor Romney is looking at either a failed presidency or almost a guaranteed successful presidency if he can get that done in the first few months. Right, and so I think he says tax cuts, maybe not.
Yeah.
We got to get this done.
Here's the question, Mark, with a minute left. Yeah. Does either side have a mandate on the tax question, on either raising revenue or dramatic cutback?
Yeah, I've done a lot of reporting on that with people in the White House, Republicans, Democrats, people around Governor Romney, and the conclusion I've reached is summed up best by one of my father's favorite jokes, which is there are only 2 people in the world who understand how the international economic system works, and unfortunately they disagree. No one really knows how it's going to end. I think a mandate's vital. I think the president can argue if he wins that he's got a mandate for raising taxes on the wealthy. He's put that at the center of his campaign more than anything else. But I don't know that that means much, because it has to be part of any deal if Barack Obama is reelected. He wouldn't need a mandate for that. The biggest optimism I have about a deal is that these are two serious guys in public life for the right reason. They understand the issues. They know that their presidency will depend on getting it done. The hard thing is you need a strong president to do tax reform, entitlement reform, to strike a grand bargain. I hope that one of them emerges stronger than they look now, with a bigger mandate than it appears they have. They'd serve themselves better if they talked more about what they wanted to do, rather than talking about who put whose dog on the roof of which car.
Mark Halperin, John Heilemann, thank you both very much.
Thank you.